There is a strong suggestion that the kids who have mental health conditions are using more screen time.
How many of you guys would put their hand up to say that they'd be okay if social media didn't exist at this moment in time in their world?
The dad of three is challenging federal leaders to raise the age limit teens can access social media from 13 to 16 years old.
We're driving everybody to 36months.com.au to sign the petition.
We need to stop having talk fests. We need action.
Anthony Albanese has today met with passionate campaigners.
Australian lawmakers have passed a bill,
A world first.
to ban children from using
Social media.
Social media is doing harm to our kids, and I'm calling time on it.
My name is Greg Atwell's Director of 36 Months. In 2024, we led a national campaign to raise the minimum age of social media from 13 to 16, the first law of its kind anywhere in the world. Now we're rebuilding the ecosystem around adolescence in politics, schools, and homes. Because healthy teens don't raise themselves. They're raised by adults brave enough to build better systems so the next generation can grow up better, not faster. Well, today I'm sitting down with Kellie Sloane, Shadow Health Minister for New South Wales, State Member for Vaucluse, and former CEO of Healthy Harold.
And big fan of 36 months.
Big fan of 36 months. Well, it's a nice segue because we connected very early on in our campaign, and you were one of the very first politicians to really champion this policy change. You made the public interest debate New South Wales Parliament happen. You got bipartisan support for that. And that, in retrospect, was a critical kind of momentum builder for federal policymaker engagement. My first question is, as a health minister, not even a comms minister, why did you lean in and help us?
So, look, I think there were three things that instantly grabbed me. Actually, four, because the first was your enthusiasm, and Whipper and the whole, team, very passionate about supporting families. From my point of view in the Shadow Health Ministry, number one, I'm deeply concerned about the rise of mental health issues in young people. The young girls in particular, the rates of self-harm have doubled over a decade or so. To me, this is a massive issue, a huge red flag. I guess the second thing is I'm a mum of three teenage boys, so I've been living it. And the third thing is, as you mentioned, I was the CEO of Life Education Healthy Harold, and one of the most popular and in-demand programs we had was around online safety, particularly as it relates to the mental health of young people. So for me, a perfect storm of interest, and I just wanted to be part of your movement and do whatever I could to support the more than 100,000 families who you had behind you, saying we need change, we need help.
So good. Well, from your vantage point now as Shadow Health Minister, what are some of the biggest things impacting teen mental health and wellbeing at the moment in our state?
Look, I think we are facing such a critical point in time when it comes to the health and wellbeing of our young people. We had this incredible cohort of young people. They are smart. They drink less alcohol. They take fewer drugs. They volunteer more than our generation. This is this incredible cohort of young people, but they have mental health issues at a level that we have never seen. So what is going wrong? Where is that breakdown? And they are unfortunately in a world, I feel sorry for them, they're in a world where they don't disconnect. We have fed them this drug that is the internet and these engaging apps that are addictive. We're addicted to them. You can't give a kid a drug and then say, stop taking it. And I don't adhere to this argument by talkback callers and stuff. We just be a parent and take it away from them. It just doesn't work. It's so complicated. And that's where I think policymakers, lawmakers, people in my position have to step in and say, parents, we're here to help you. And we need to throw out that life raft until we can figure out how we weather this storm.
Totally. And we talked a lot about that, this idea that changing the law gives parents air cover
Totally.
Yeah, and that's kind of what you need on a day-to-day basis as a dad, as a mum, when you're battling with things like time limits and, how much time they're spending alone in their room and all these
Yeah.
kinds of things. You just need some air cover because it's so challenging.
So you do, because these companies are so powerful, and the drug they're pushing onto our kids is so addictive
Mm.
that we can't fight against that, and our kids will outsmart us.
Mm.
And it's become part of their social connection, and there's good and there's bad in that. But I had a school tour through Parliament yesterday. I was chatting to these kids. I said, "What do you think about the social media ban?" And the majority of them in this group said, "We're in favour of it." This is a
Yeah.
bunch of 14-year-olds. They said, "As long as our mates aren't on it,
Yeah.
we're happy with it."
Yep.
And that's what I'm hearing, and that's what the research is showing. New South Wales Health Department surveyed young people, and most of them were in favour of this.
Mm.
And that's really telling, I think. Other surveys of mental health of young people, older cohorts of young people, say that they wish they didn't have social media. They love the good parts, but the bad parts are so punishing and have been so harmful to their mental health, that they're in support of what's happening with these laws as well.
Yeah. Well, what it does is it takes away the fear of missing out, and it takes away the moment by moment indication of whether or not I belong in my peer group,
Yeah.
which is so a lot for a young person to have to navigate. Like going through puberty is hard enough, right?
It is. Look, one of these little kids yesterday said to me, "Look, I have friends overseas and it's my only way of staying in contact with them." And I've also heard from other advocacy groups for kids with disabilities, or they might be LGBTQI plus communities. And I totally understand that social media can be a force for good and a way for them to connect. But what I said to this kid was, the social media companies will innovate. They'll find ways to connect you in safe ways. And this is about these huge multinational companies creating a safe space for our kids. And it's incumbent upon them to do it. So we set the laws, and that will be a catalyst for innovation in online forums,
Yeah. It's a
for
great point.
healthy online spaces. And I think it's really important.
That's a really, really good point. Where are the opportunities for parents, educators at the moment to sort of start to change the way that we think about
Yeah.
this?
Look, I think it starts with listening to parents,
Yeah.
right? So you created this movement with more than 114,000 parents signing a signature.
Yeah.
Politicians need to listen to that and
Mm.
tap into those groups. And you brought them into Parliament. I listened to them. I've stayed connected with them. We need to find alternatives for kids as well. And I'm really sad about this erosion of community assets, ways for us to come together face to face.
Yeah.
I'm concerned about the fact that programs that sort of our government brought about, active kids vouchers to help families to keep their kids playing sport during a cost of living crisis, have evaporated. I think it's a health initiative that we need to fund again, because a lot of families can't afford to pay the sports fees for the sports uniforms and the $200 cost to sign up to the local rugby club or whatever. We need to get kids back into sport. And for me, that's been a saving grace as a mum of teenage boys. Their sport motivates them, keeps them socially minded, makes sure they're not up late at night.
Yeah.
So I think that's really important as well. How do we build those connections? We're seeing the loss of community facilities and sporting grounds, public green spaces getting chewed up by housing without really thoughtful town planning.
Yeah.
I think it needs to be a holistic approach. So I
Yeah.
think we need to think outside of the let's ban, the banning is really important because it's going to trigger safe spaces and innovation. And then we need to go a bit further abroad into how do we educate kids in schools,
Yeah.
create that awareness, but then we also need to look at how we're creating our communities, ways for people to come together. There is this massive loneliness epidemic.
Huh.
There is now a minister for loneliness in
Really?
the UK. There is.
Wow.
And there's been a parliamentary inquiry into loneliness. The biggest cohort of lonely people? It's young people
Yeah.
who have never been more connected online, but have never felt so socially isolated and
Yeah.
vulnerable. And that is leading to this mental health epidemic that we're seeing as well.
Yeah. Wow. It's interesting your point there about sort of grassroots community sport. It probably does a few things. We have some psychologists sort of connected in our ecosystem, and they reflected back on this idea that one of the ways to cultivate resilience in a young person is to make sure that they have multiple peer groups outside of their school cohort.
Okay.
So not just the school friends, but the soccer friends or the netball friends or swimming friends, or they might have friends that they see at youth group or something like that. And the idea is that inevitably at some point they're going to go through a dip or a patch with their schoolmates that makes them feel a little bit on the outside looking in. But if they've got other peer groups that they can lean on during that time, it actually helps kind of foster resilience. And so one of the great things about grassroots community sport is it gives young people a peer group outside of their school friends, and not just doing sport at school, but actually doing sport, as you said, like in the community, kind of on the weekend as part of a community club. Even the idea that, like learning to do hard things and learning that you are capable of doing hard things and all that sort of stuff.
Well, the school that my boys go to in year 9, they send them away for 6 months, right? No mobile phones, no laptops. It's books, it's writing letters home to parents, but they don't just turn off the digital world. They give them that framework, those skills to navigate the hard times and how to be resilient. And I've seen that emerging in schools everywhere, because that year 9 period at school, it's like a rite of passage for these kids. They're going from boys to men or girls to women. Hormones are going crazy. How do we tap into that? So many cultures around the world outside of Western culture have these sort of transition to manhood, these ceremonial rites, this sort of pride in being a man, and what is a good man? What is a good woman? What does it mean to be a great citizen? And I think we need to embed more of that pride. Young boys in particular globally are feeling quite disaffected, feeling like they shouldn't be proud of their masculinity at this point in time. I think we need to invest in young boys in particular. And then for young girls to say, and it horrifies me to look on the social media to see young girls whose self-worth and value is in likes and emojis. And if you're skinny enough, or if you apply a filter that'll smooth your skin out, I find it devastating, actually. And I'm so glad that wasn't around when I was a young girl. So I think we need to address issues of self-esteem, resilience, pride in your identity, whatever that is. And that's where the education piece is going to play such a critical role.
Yeah. Really interesting what you said then around learning about things like healthy masculinity, femininity. Like there's a lot of commentary on toxic masculinity, but I know as a boy growing up, like I really craved those positive male role models that helped me understand what a good man was and what the function of a good man showing up in the world kind of looks like. And I agree, yeah, it feels like it's missing more and more, maybe less visible than it used to be in the past.
I think so. We're in a culture of extremes at the moment. You're left or you're right, or you're this or you're that. You pick a side. Whatever happened to the sensible center, right?
And the algorithm creates an echo chamber
100%.
and feeds you content only like on the extreme that and it pushes you further to the end of that spectrum, doesn't it? Yeah.
And that's, again, I keep coming back to education because that's where we need to be teaching our kids critical thinking.
Yeah.
And the schools do a good job of this, but we need to invest in that heavily. How to beat that algorithm, right? And how to, search for other content.
Yeah.
How to be open-minded.
Yeah.
Don't take the easy path, challenge yourself.
Yeah, I love that. Well, we've always thought of ourselves as a mums and dads movement. As the Shadow New South Wales Health Minister, what would your encouragement be to the mums and dads of New South Wales at the moment?
I would say, keep speaking up because we're listening.
Yeah.
There's nothing more powerful than a motivated parent or a worried parent.
Yeah.
Parent who believes there's some injustice. There's watch out, a mother scorned, or because we are so powerful as parents. This energy comes from some primal place, right? And when we multiply that by coming together in groups, it's really powerful. And we've seen, the rise of huge movements in the US, mother groups coming together. I think we can do that in a really Australian way, where it's really positive and proactive, and we're not going to go into sort of crazy tinfoil hat sort of, anti-vax type, areas, but harness people power is what I would say.
Yeah. What people might not know is that we had 127,000 people sign our petition for policy change and social media
growing
reform.
it like
Yeah, but 95% of that were women.
Yeah.
And we know that we were a parent community, so we assume then that mostly mums, right? So we sort of nickname that coalition or that force the Mother Army, and I love what you said, like mums are a force to be reckoned with, particularly when
Absolutely.
they believe something needs to be changed. Yeah, yeah.
And, there's another power, and that is it's a democratic power, because a lot of mums, well, they control the purse strings in the household as well. So they have the buying power. So companies listen to them. Politicians should be listening to them, because it's the mum on the couch talking to the husband saying, you're going to vote for this person.
Yeah,
because they're
true.
doing the right thing, right? There is a huge cohort of swinging voters. And also in a couple of careers before politics, I worked in television, and when the ratings came in, we were most focused on that mum demographic.
Really?
Because they also controlled the remote control back then,
And they are also running neighborhoods on WhatsApp.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
and community sport and all those things. Like, there's
mums carry a lot of responsibility, a lot of weight,
the mental load.
Yeah. And we care deeply, and we're really passionate and empathetic. And I think we've seen in recent times, and this is one of the beauties of online forums, one of the great positivities about online, that they are bringing parents together. And when that happens, people in my position should be leaning in and should be listening and should be taking note.
I love that. Well, I'm keen to learn a little bit more about you and what growing up was like for you. So, 36 months, we're very focused on the critical 36 months between 13 and 16 as like a key developmental window for a young person. So I want you to cast your mind back to 13-year-old Kellie. How was your high school experience? Where did you go to high school? Where did you grow up? Highs, lows, everything in between.
Yeah, wow. So, of course, it wasn't that long ago.
Yeah, sorry.
That was a long time ago. So when I was 13, I was grew up in the country, regional South Australia.
Oh, wow.
Went to Newryalpa High School in the Barossa public high school. Caught the bus. Remember a lot of boredom, I guess, is, back being in the country at that, riding my bike to friends' places, going to my best friend's place and kind of leafing through Dolly magazine. That was, we didn't have mobile phones, of course. So I remember a lot of letter writing, even in school classes, actually, to my best friend, and no emojis back then. It was like scratch and sniff stickers and just, family and community, friends, obviously at that age shape your world. You want to fit in. You want to be noticed, but not too much. You just kind of want to be the same as everyone else. And but I had a lot of freedom. I remember feeling free, and the sky felt bigger back then. The days felt longer. I had time to think. I did a lot of reading. And I sometimes reflect on that time and then look at my kids' lives that are so busy, and there's not really much downtime and not much boredom. Attention spans shorter. My attention span much shorter than when I was younger. So I kind of, I reflect fondly on that time of my life, actually.
Yeah, boredom's an interesting one. I heard a thought once, this idea that creativity happens in the margin. So remember your workbook in school, and it was in the margin that you'd often like doodle or draw or just play, like, and your work was over here. And then I think about that in life, like when our plate is full and when we've got no margin, we're just burning through the jobs to be done. And sometimes it can affect our ability to think laterally and to approach problems kind of creatively. And so, yeah, I'm just interested if you've got any further thoughts on this idea of boredom. I think it's something that is missing from the growing up experience of our young people that might actually be a healthy and a good thing for their development.
Yeah, I think about it a lot. And interestingly, when we were in lockdown in COVID, one of our boys, we were very fortunate that we live over the road from a big park.
Yeah.
And one of our boys, after he'd done his online schoolwork, and there wasn't much of it, he would meet his friends in the park for that hour that we're allowed to go out and exercise. They would jump on their bikes like little BMX bandits. They would build jumps. They would be creative. They'd get sticks. They would come back red faced, sweaty, and dirty. And that was my childhood, right? Going out. And I don't know how we carved that kind of time out. They banned the kids from doing that because it was destroying this little area of the park. And I just think, I don't know, we've got to find ways for kids to be kids.
Yeah. And for kids to be bored because
Yeah.
then they imagine things to do. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, they do. And look, I think that's where often your summer holidays come into play a bit. You know, the school, lots of parents are working too. And so we kind of, you've got both parents working these days and working long hours perhaps and running around trying to drop kids here, there, and everywhere in a busy city with a lot of traffic and I guess it's really hard to find those moments. I think with teenagers, my moments are every opportunity I get, I'll drive them and their friends or pick them up from a party or take them to sport because I just find even those moments in the car, chatting side by side without looking at each other are
Yeah.
really the most valuable conversations.
Have we
you
spoken
have.
about this, the side by side versus face to face? Oh, so Dr. Billy Garvey, who's a developmental pediatrician down in Melbourne, like 3-year waiting list to see him type thing. He was talking to us about the power of side by side versus face to face. So he goes, if you're trying to connect with a young person, sitting across from them, looking at them face to face is quite intimidating for a young
Yeah.
person. They feel judged. They don't like to make eye contact. It's you're not necessarily going to get the best out of them in that posture. He goes, but if you just shift it to sit next to them or go for a walk so that you're side by side and you're not having to look at each other, or go for a drive where you're in the car and you're both facing this way, young people have a tendency to open up more side by side than they do if you try and have a face-to-face conversation.
It's totally my experience too.
Yeah.
And the other trick for parents out there is when you pick up your kids from a party, they forget that you're there. They think of you as an Uber driver and they start chatting. You learn a whole lot of stuff
You
then
learn
too.
a lot of stuff. That is awesome. The other thing that's come up a bit in these chats with some of our guests is, and you talked about this idea of wanting to fit in as a 13-year-old kind of Kelly, and how fitting in isn't necessarily the same as belonging. Kind of two different things, right? And so my question is more around belonging. Like in your teenage experience, did you feel like you belonged? And if so, kind of how did that feeling kind of come about? Like, were you part of a group or a club, or like what were the kind of the characteristics of that idea of you feeling like you belong?
I think I probably had a normal level of teenage anxiety about whether I was cool enough or doing the right things or whether I had the right genes or, I remember I always had one or two close friends and then a loose, broader group, and I was never part of the cool crowd. But it's funny, you leave high school and you catch up with people later. And I had this chat with someone, my dad, and I said, I never really felt like I was there. Like, what? You're at the center of everything. But you don't feel that right at the time. And I think that's just a normal teenage, you're going through times of change and trying to figure out your identity and who you are and what you want to be. You've got dreams, but you don't know if you can achieve them. You don't think you're ever pretty enough, and or sporty enough, But I think that's a normal part of development, and I think that's when you have role models or sports coaches or a teacher that inspires you. And I found there were teachers that inspired me. I loved writing. I loved, um, you know, talking to people, and I would end up becoming a journalist. That's what I wanted to be. And I had teachers who sort of made me feel like I could achieve that. I think you can't underestimate the value of recognizing and telling a young person, hey, I really liked the way you did that. Not about their looks, not about their whatever, but I like the way you think about that. Tell me, and having genuine conversations, because they don't expect that sometimes from adults.
Yeah.
And I know when adults took the time to ask me those kind of questions, it was really reinforcing.
Yeah.
Made me feel like I could take on the world, that maybe I had what it took to chase those dreams.
It's a cool question that I've read somewhere that in that sort of teenage kind of window, one of the questions that drive us is, do I have what it takes, particularly for young boys?
And I still have that.
Yeah.
I still have imposter syndrome.
And do you have like a core memory that still feels quite vivid to you that has shaped the way that you show up in the world?
Interesting. Look, when I was 14, I went on a student exchange to Germany. And mum and dad had never been overseas themselves. They couldn't afford to go overseas, right? But they did what so many parents did, and they sacrificed for their kids to have those opportunities. I always remember being so grateful for that opportunity. And I think when I think about a memory, there's a picture of me and dad at the airport, and we're looking at each other. And oh my gosh, I'm getting a bit teary. And, there's a tear because I was venturing out into the world, right? And they believed in me, they'd invested in me. I was excited, I was scared. And it was really a life-shaping time for me. And I came back, I was a lot more grown up. I'd had my first kiss. I'd had a lot of freedoms. I came home just really appreciating home, and then just having, ignited this desire for travel and adventure and language and different people. And, I never forget that. And I always think, the people that change our world are parents. Parents who just put their kids first, invest in them. Parents who work 2 jobs to put their kids in good schools. And that's the fabric of our society. And they're the people that in my job every day in Parliament in New South Wales I'm working for. Like, how do we make their lives easier? They're going to work hard. How do we reduce their taxes? How do we make sure that government is not interfering in their lives? If I'm doing my job well, people shouldn't notice what I'm doing, right? But the moment government becomes an obstacle, we should be doing everything we can do to get out of their way. And it's families that we should be invested. They're the ones that parents create little adventurers, people that are ready to take on the world, and with that safety net and that security and knowing you're loved and invested in, I think you can really take on the world.
It's a beautiful answer. I love that. That was great. Well, having intentional breaks without distractions helps us uncover the best version of ourselves. And our premium partner, KitKat, stands for better breaks, purposeful pauses or moments to switch off without life's distractions in all their forms. A purposeful break can maintain a positive mindset, clarity of thinking and focus, and bring us back to tasks feeling more refreshed, present, and connected to others. In a world that has never been more digitally connected, what are some of the ways you like to take a better break?
So first of all, I don't do enough of that. I think it's so important because my phone doesn't stop in the job I'm in. So occasionally I will leave my phone at home and go for a walk. And I start off quite anxious. What am I missing? Who's trying to call me? But I come back so happy, I have to say. So walking without my phone. The other thing is time with my girlfriends and putting the phone away. Just came back from a girls' trip
Did you?
with a bunch of the mums, the sort of the primary school mums, and had the best time, and then hardly ever looked at my phone. Like I had 2 hours in the morning where I had to get up early and do some work. Then I put the phone away, and it's just freeing, It's great. So
There is a little moment though at the start, you're right, where there's some anxiety around what am I missing out on, that I think there is a bit of pain in that disconnect moment, isn't there, before you feel free?
yeah, and what a shame. And
Yeah.
I've actually noticed myself that when I'm feeling anxious, I've usually been scrolling on the phone and going through, and it's not productive. I think chunks like a power hour going through your social media and your messages and your emails, and allowing yourself that time, but then putting the phone away and going, now it's time for a bit of deep work
Yeah.
or a bit of connection with colleagues, go for a walk down the corridor, say hi to people,
Yeah.
come back, and then you're more productive.
Yeah.
So I think actually taking a break, a really purposeful break, improves your productivity
Yeah.
in the long run. It's just about me practicing that more often. I know it to be true. I've just got to actually almost diarize it, I think. So I do it.
I love that. This has been enlightening and delightful. We're going to finish with a game of word association tennis.
Uh-oh.
Okay. So I'm going to say a random word.
Yep.
You're going to respond with whatever pops into your head, and then I'll respond back. We'll kind of go back and forth like this till it feels like it's a good, 30 seconds or so until it feels
What
like.
could possibly go wrong?
Yes. What could possibly go wrong? So I'm going to start with walk.
Sore ankle.
Cool. Girlfriends.
Annabelle.
Free.
Swimming.
Germany.
Olivia.
The country.
Red earth.
Grounded.
Nature.
Hope.
My kids.
It's a great place to finish.
It's a great place to start and finish.
Yeah.
I love what you're doing for our kids. Thank you.
Thank you. And you. Bring back those active kids vouchers.
Yeah, 100%.